Welcome to Love and Leadership, the podcast that helps you lead with both your head and your heart, plus a bit of humor. I'm Kristen Sharkey, a leadership coach and facilitator.
And I'm Mike Sharkey, a senior living and hospitality executive. We're a couple of leadership nerds who also happen to be a couple.
Join us each week as we share our unfiltered opinions, break down influential books, and interview inspiring guests.
Whether you're a seasoned executive or a rising star, we're here to help you level up your leadership game and amplify your impact.
Hello, and welcome back to Love and Leadership. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mike.
And today we have an LBC episode.
LBC.
And we are talking about Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. I think that's right.
Yes, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Unreasonable Hospitality, the remarkable power of giving people more than they expect. This is, it. At first blush, it might not be exactly a leadership book, but it's absolutely a leadership book.
It is, yeah.
Will has a lot of management and leadership experience. And as it pertains to everyone in your business, we're all serving some customers. We're all serving someone. So, you know, the lessons in here are absolutely applicable to whatever you're doing, unless you're just mining Bitcoin or something. I don't know, which is great for you. Congratulations on your fabulous wealth at this point. But, you know, the rest of us are working for somebody, and Will has a great mindset for it. So Will Guidara, born 1979, is an American restaurateur based in New York City, along with chef Daniel Hume, co-owned the Make It Nice Hospitality Group, established in 2011, which owns and operates 11 Madison Park, Nomad New York, Nomad Los Angeles, Nomad Las Vegas.
Just all the Nomad properties.
A native of Sleepy Hollow, New York, Guidara graduated from Cornell.
We might have a
cat visitor. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Ever since we changed the name to Love and Leadership and Cats, we have not had cat visitors because cats do cat things. But now it looks like she's trying to get over here.
Attracted some interest.
Jesus, you can come this way. Okay. We'll see if she visits. So Mr. Guidara began his dining room career at Wolfgang Puck's Spago in Beverly Hills, where he got his butt kicked on the floor as a food runner. Will then went on to various roles in Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality Group, including Tabla, Cafe 2, and the restaurants at the Museum of Modern Art. Danny Meyer's restaurant group is super, super famous. If you're from New York or Earth, you probably have heard of him. He's the genius behind Shake Shack.
Yeah, which I did not know until reading this book,
along with Will. And Will wanted to become the GM of Shake Shack. That was his dream. And instead, Danny got him to take the job at 11 Madison Park, and the rest is history. Will is married to the amazing pastry chef, Christina Tossi, who made the best cookie I am sure I will ever have in my life. I was there working just down the street when they opened Milk Bar in the late 2000s, David Chang, when he took over New York with Momofuku. And the cookie was so good. I know it had cornflakes in it. It was so good that I thought it might not be vegetarian. And I was like, there has to be like beef tallow in this or something. And I went back to check we got a box of them for the restaurant I was working at, Angelica Kitchen, and we brought it back. The waiters like, we'll send the manager out during the shift with our tips to get like snacks. And we went to Momofuku Milk Bar one day and got a whole like 24 cookies, and still the best cookie I've ever had.
Wow.
Miss Tossi has an amazing episode on Netflix, Chef's Table. She is a genius, and I'm not surprised the two of them got married. I will say this book and this episode is particularly close to my heart. I worked in restaurants for 17 years, and serving others in one form or another is clearly my life's work. You know, it's a very powerful thing to help others, care for others, serve others. A student of Confucius asked him about how to serve heaven, and Kongzi kind of admonished him and told him to go back and learn how to serve people first. So a couple caveats. I have not had the chance yet to eat at 11 Madison Park. I was poor while I lived in New York. And, they weren't super on my radar at the time. They got famous as I was leaving. And I can't personally speak to the awesomeness of the cuisine. I do have a deep respect for Daniel Hume. Will and Daniel at some point broke up. They had a falling out. They don't talk about it much. It's a very intense life. And Daniel is a traditional Swiss chef with a probably very high strung and angry. If any of you seen The Bear, that chef, the mean one, might in some way at least be based off Daniel. But he is a unparalleled genius who reinvents himself constantly. And in that spirit of constant reinvention and growth, after Will had left 11 Madison Park during COVID, during the pandemic, Daniel had some sort of revelation and decided he needed to reinvent his relationship with food. And I mean, they had a very hard time, especially the high-end restaurants in the beginning. Nobody was going to high-end restaurants anymore, and doing delivery, like your Chinese takeout, is not the same. You're trying to serve $1,000 meals. So he also had a epiphany, realized we had to change our connection to food, and he turned 11 Madison Park completely plant-based, which is insane.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy because it's
for a three Michelin
starred restaurant, San Pellegrino's #1 restaurant in the world. He did this to the jeers by public and critics and other people who just said, "You're crazy, you're going to lose your stars." And in fact, he did not lose his stars. He's been reviewed several more times by the Michelin Guide and kept his stars. So you can make plant-based food as high art and amazing food. Chinese cuisine has had traditions of vegetarians for 4,000 years, and India maybe even longer. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And
it's also just a cool story of doing something that feels deeply right to you when everybody else is telling you it's not going to work and proving them wrong. I always love those.
And this whole book is kind of an exploration of both of them doing something different and new and doing it their way. Sometimes they're insane, for sure, but they have such a high standard and a drive to win that it works. I will also say this book mostly recounts EMP's 11 Madison Park for EMP quest for Michelin stars and other lofty awards. This path may be laudable, but it also has human complications. Many restaurateurs myself included, work 100+ hour weeks. And I'm not exaggerating, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. You go home, you sleep for 5 hours, you stumble back to, it's crazy.
There are no holidays.
There are no holidays. There is now, there's probably mandated health insurance, but there wasn't then. And so do I condone this pursuit of fame and glory at the expense of the health and families? I've walked this path many times. It definitely didn't work for me. I do respect the tireless pursuit of excellence and the people that choose to go this route. But Will does not address aggressively some of the darker underbelly of restaurant life that you can probably read in Kitchen Confidential and Anthony Bourdain's work. That's very real.
That's like the counterpart.
I will also say very seriously, though, I don't believe food is a competition. I think the fetishization and this Food Network culture that we have, where food is to feed and nourish people, and that's its main thing. And I respect these high achieving people, but I don't want to say we have starving people in there. There's enough food on earth for everyone to eat very well, and we haven't seemed to figure out how to do that, and that's very sad. And restaurants have a big part in the waste of food. There's a lot of waste, and in fine dining, there's a tremendous amount of waste.
I believe it.
Yeah, you cut the little triangle that you want out of the pineapple slice, and because you can only get 2 perfect triangles out of it, you throw the rest away. Hopefully, if you're smart, 11 Madison Park donated to food pantries and City Harvest and things like that, but there's a lot of waste. Okay. I will also say we talk about Michelin stars a lot. If you don't know the history of Michelin, it is Michelin tires, and it was a guide that came out in France, I think in the early 1900s, from Michelin tires who were trying to promote their tires. And they wanted to encourage people to take road trips. So they started rating restaurants, and their standards were 1 star was worth a stop, 2 stars was worth a detour, and 3 stars was worth a special trip to go do that. And I think that holds today. 3 stars is extraordinarily hard to achieve. and to maintain it over time is very, very hard.
Yeah.
I'm going to digress a lot. Get ready. Strap in.
It's very personal.
It's very personal.
Yeah, and Mike had read this book before, and we bumped it up on our podcast list because he's currently doing it with his team.
Yeah, it's a one-stop shop of just going the extra mile for people and taking service to the next level. I'm reminded of, I don't know if it's on Netflix, but there is a great movie called Hero Dreams of Sushi. Another like sushi chef, or another chef with just the highest, craziest standards. His sushi restaurant was in a subway, like down the stairs of a subway in Tokyo, and it's like 12 seats. So they gave this little, I think he was like 85 when they gave him the award, and they gave him 3 Michelin stars. And some people, it was when Michelin first went to Tokyo, and people were like very surprised. The idea of the traditional French restaurants were very fancy and overblown, and here you're giving 3 stars to this unassuming Japanese man that has a restaurant in a subway station. And they asked Michelin, why did you give him 3 stars? And they said, well, we couldn't give him 4. So
that's cool.
It's cool. And this book is a love letter to high achievement and the pursuit of ever-increasing excellence. Will is a unabashed perfectionist, which is not healthy. But, I personally respect people that dedicate this much passion and focus to their work.
Yeah.
And food especially.
Yeah, and I will say, this was my first read of this book. I do not come from like a restaurant or hospitality background, but I really, really enjoyed it. It's a very narrative-heavy book, and if you've listened to past LVC episodes...
Your favorite.
But it's like heavy narrative books. Not all of them, but like in the business book world are often pretty hit or miss for me. But I felt this kind of read like a novel in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's a story. Yeah. It's Will's story.
Yeah, it was a very enjoyable read for me.
So Will at some point makes friends with Simon Sinek, and I think Simon's his coach. So Simon does the introduction. So he says, this is not just a book about a talented entrepreneur. It's an exploration of how to treat people and how to listen, how to be curious, and how to love the feeling of others feeling welcomed. Hospitality is making people feel like they belong. Will thinks about hospitality as an act of service, how his service makes people feel they should be cared for and loved. It's inspiring to get a team to work together and create a sense of belonging, and we should be unreasonable in our expectations of this hospitality. And I also go back and we're going to flesh this out over the book. It's not about formality. It's not about fancy. It's not about the old school stiff kind of, it's the sincerity of the heart. And I go back to our honeymoon at the Maldives. A lot of dropped balls, but no one cared because everyone was so kind and gracious and welcoming and just, that's what counted. Okay. Let's jump in. Chapter 1, Welcome to the Hospitality Economy. So Will talks about the human desire for care. And here we find Will's foundation in the business is shaped by his family. His father is a restaurateur and his mother is a flight attendant. He finds through this, the desire to be taken care of never goes away. We don't leave humans behind, and we're here to make people feel good and happy. He gets that kind of service mindset from his family. His mom actually starts to experience some terrible health issues. She becomes a quadriplegic. He compares service versus hospitality. Service is very black and white. Hospitality is the myriad of colors. Service is like the technical side of things. You're doing your job with confidence, but hospitality is that warmth and making people feel cared about, making them feel great about the job you're doing for them. That's what we really experienced in the Maldives. I had better cappuccinos in New York than I did, but the way they lovingly prepared them made up for,
Yeah. It's like hospitality is really about how you make people feel.
Yeah. So he explores creating a culture of hospitality.
Yeah. And I thought it was also, he says this in several points, that hospitality is not just for the hospitality industry, which we think of as like hotels and and travel and restaurants probably. But he points out, interesting, like 3/4 of our GDP comes from service-based industries.
Yep.
So this is important for everyone, really.
Yeah. He talks about focusing intentionally and passionately on wholehearted graciousness and connection. This is his raison d'etre and his core of hospitality. And he addresses this through a couple key questions. How do we make the people who work for us and the people we care for feel seen and valued? How do we give them a sense of belonging? How do we make them feel part of something bigger than themselves? And how do we make them feel welcomed? And I think what's interesting and unique about this is that he's working with these ideas for his team members and not just his customers. I think Danny Meyer, I don't know if he pioneered it, but his whole concept is very big on you take care of the team first, and we'll go further into that. So hospitality is a core value. Hospitality can be taught. The hospitality experience begins the moment we connect with someone and ends only when they decide it does. And this point is very salient. Hospitality and service it's a selfish pleasure. It does feel great to make others feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those of us that have made this in some way our life's work, we get a lot of joy out of the simple touches that we can provide to people and the light in their eyes when we do something unexpected. I've got a little Nespresso machine in my office, and when people come up and I'll be like, "Can I make you a cappuccino?" And they're used to showing up and just getting some crappy coffee, if that. And they're just very kind of taken aback by it. And I absolutely enjoy it. I don't care if it's a line level team member or if it's the president of the board. I will make you a cappuccino when you come to my office. It's fun for me, right? So he talks about turning the world of service and hospitality from black and white to really color. Chapter 2, making magic in a world that could use more of it. And this is probably misattributed, but to Maya Angelou, people may forget what you did or said, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah. It's kind of the core of marketing and advertising as well. So it's like an interesting crossover.
Yeah. Well, the feeling like that lasts, like the body keeps score. It keeps positive score as well. And I think generally people read that book in terms of resolving trauma, but those positive feelings probably last as well. They're very powerful,
Yep.
His first experience really at something special, he goes with his father to the Four Seasons. They have an amazing experience. He's just blown away by the magic of it all, the seamlessness of the service, the extravagance of the food.
And this was specifically, I think he was around 12, if I remember right. This was after his mother had recently died.
Did she die already? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very powerful story and talks about just how meaningful it was and how he saw the grief and pain in his dad's face be replaced with just the beauty of the experience.
So it must have been in the first chapter, he talked about the idea of being made of feeling welcomed. His mother eventually lost the ability to speak, but she would wait, and her caregiver would wheel her to the front of the house, and she would wait for him to come home from school in the window and welcome him home. And that was his experience. Even though she was suffering, she made him feel very welcomed every time he came home from school. And that became a very powerful imprint on him, what it feels like to be wanted and welcome.
I might have mixed up the story. The experience with his dad may actually not be the Four Seasons. I think I mixed these up, but it was very...
Yeah, the book maybe took me a minute to kind of organize, but the first couple of chapters are Will forming his life's work.
Yeah.
And these are very powerful moments, his mother's illness, his father still going to work 12 hours a day in his restaurant group, and starting Will off on this path, which he takes to very quickly.
Yeah.
Anyway, chapter 3, the extraordinary power of intention. So his father is the president of a restaurant association. He introduced him to the business at a young age. His father balanced parenting, caring for his quadriplegic wife, and working 15-hour days. This required extreme discipline and organization, something that Will picked up, in this business, intentionality is not just a business philosophy, it's a requirement to do something thoughtfully with clear purpose and an eye on the results. We now see chefs like with their incredible precision, the way they put things on the plate, the swish, the swirl, the colors. Will takes this into the dining room and also into financial management, which is something I really love about his approach. He plays the P&L like it's a cello, and I identify with that. He has an intentionality for every single thing that he does in the restaurant all day long.
Yeah. It's like every decision, no matter how mundane, matters.
Absolutely. He gets accepted into the Cornell Hotel program. His father's skeptical, having met graduates who think they are ready to be the CEO immediately. Will differs by having actual job experience. And I echo this. When I was in the business, like often the last person we would want to hire is somebody with a culinary degree. They have often very little real world experience. And they think they know everything. And they have no idea what the brutality of restaurant life is. And they show up and they want to put things on the menu themselves and put pine nuts on everything. And it's like, dude, the dishes are up to the ceiling. I need you to go back there and like help the dishwasher for the next 14 hours. Not what not the experience they thought they were going to be getting. So his father's skeptical of that. But he trusts his instincts. He goes ahead. At some point, he encounters Danny Meyer's restaurant group. And he experiences 11 Madison Park when it's a brasserie, not in its current form. Meyer brings a more relaxed, kind of a Midwestern hospitality to fine dining, very refined, very focused. He calls his model enlightened hospitality. And he prioritizes employees over guests and investors. He hires great people, treats them well, and invests in their growth. Will is initially unsure if fine dining really suits him, but he does learn. And he figures it's easier to learn this high-end style and go back to burgers and fries than it is the reverse. I do want to say, too, I gave this book to an extended member of my leadership team. She absolutely loves it, and she's gushing over it. And I don't think she's ever really worked in restaurants. I could be wrong. And I wanted to put some caveats on it, too. Danny Meyer probably has $100 million, and until the government made him, I seriously doubt his cooks had health insurance.
Yeah.
So I love the guy. I love his philosophy, but we're still existing in a capitalist society, and restaurants are certainly have a history of exploitation and unreasonable expectations for guests. I remember being in New York at Angelica Kitchen, and we're selling a cup of organic butternut squash vegan soup for $3.25. And there's no way that's what it really costs. Somebody grew that, harvested it, packaged it, shipped it, delivered it, unpacked it, stored it, took it out of the fridge, washed it, peeled it, cut it, removed the seeds, and then cooked it, and then prepared it for service. And then some dumbass waiter, put it in a cup and took it out to you. That's not $3.25. That's $30 at least. So but the way that it's only $3 is our cooks didn't have health insurance. So there's a lot of iniquities. I love all these guys, but I do want to address the system issues. Anyway, before we talk about enlightened hospitality, Mr. Meyer, I do love his stuff. But Chapter 4, Lessons in Enlightened Hospitality. Will works as a manager at Tabla, an Indian restaurant, breaking boundaries in the U.S. He learns the power of being an underdog. They wear that as a badge of honor. He gains hands-on experience in the kitchen. He develops respect for its intensity and precision. He starts to really pick up some leadership ideas. He notices managers who have great presence. When a great leader enters the room, people straighten up, but they also smile. I had somebody told me that. He's like, you can tell a leader. There are leaders that when they show up, everybody kind of relaxes, and not because they're taking it easy, because they know they've got a powerful person on their side. And then there's leaders who show up and in a room and everybody tenses up.
Yep.
Which one are you?
Yep.
So in enlightened hospitality, going above and beyond becomes ingrained in the culture. That's part of their culture, right? And they have a fun concept they call the grace note, which is small, unexpected gestures that elevate hospitality. If you're not a musician, a grace note is a small note that happens before the main note that can accentuate it, frame it within a melody, but it's small and delicate and light, and it's not the main note. But so here's a fun example. While he's there, he's serving dinner to a couple who are celebrating their anniversary. And at some point in the meal, they exclaim to the waiter, "Oh no, we left the champagne in the freezer because we put it in there so we could drink it later. It's going to explode." So the sommelier, instead of allowing that to happen, takes their keys, runs uptown to their apartment, takes the champagne out of the freezer, doesn't just do that. He leaves a handwritten note that the restaurant signs for them, chocolates, caviar, and the card on the table. These people will never forget that experience.
Oh, yeah.
They will go back to that restaurant every year for the rest of their lives to celebrate their anniversary. And that's like what the Ritz knows. They're providing such a bespoke, personalized service that you can't get that. You shouldn't be able to get that anywhere else. They want you to be a customer forever,
Yeah.
And people are, right? So during this time at Danny Meyer's group, he runs into Randy Garutti, who's the future CEO of Shake Shack, who is apparently the most annoyingly positive person that has ever lived. And he'll ask Randy how he's doing, and Randy will go, "I'm just trying to make today the best day of my life." Okay, that's annoying. But, that contagious positive energy lifts up the team. As a recovering curmudgeonly New Yorker, I can confirm that. He develops an ownership mindset. At some point, tosses the 22-year-old Will the keys to the restaurant and says, "Lock up when you leave." And he's trusting Will to take care of his baby, and Will steps up to that, and he realizes that something Jocko talks about, right? Early, if you see somebody with potential, put them in charge of something, don't do everything for them. So it builds trust, it builds ownership, and tossing the keys becomes a leadership philosophy. I practice this. I also like to go home and not work an 80-hour week, but growing young leaders, growing people, if you're not doing that, you don't have a good organization. 100% you don't. So I love this concept that they talk about. Language creates culture. It's so powerful. It's so true. So Danny Meyer coins phrases that embed values into the team's DNA. Things like constant gentle pressure, right? You're always improving. Make it nice. Daniel Hume's watchword catchphrase, like that's their business. It's make it nice. How do I do that? Oh, make it nicer. Playing offense and defense. They talk about improving good experiences versus fixing mistakes. Be the swan, which means guests see grace and the effort remains hidden. We have a saying in the business, no one needs to see how the sausage is made.
Hey there. You know how easy it is to get caught up in the day-to-day grind of leadership? Putting out fires, dealing with endless emails, back-to-back meetings. Before you know it, you've lost sight of the bigger picture. If you're feeling overwhelmed or disconnected from your leadership purpose, I've got something for you. And it's completely free. It's a 5-day leadership reset challenge I've put together. Each day you'll spend just 10 to 15 minutes on a quick exercise. We'll help you get clear on your vision again, boost your confidence, improve how you communicate, and more. If this sounds like something you could use, check out the show notes, or you can go directly to llpod.link/challenge to get your free challenge guide. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Now back to the show.
Yeah, that's the classic. I used an image when I did a talk recently of a duck where the above the surface looks super graceful and you don't see like the frantic paddling underneath. So
yeah,
it's a good metaphor.
Yeah.
Be the swan.
Yeah, be the swan dance technique called the Berezovka glide. And if you've ever seen The King's Men, Rasputin enters doing the Berezovka glide. And you wear a dress that's just long enough to hide your feet and you move your feet very, very fast. And if you do it right, you've controlled your upper body into the way that it truly looks like you're floating. So that's their be the swan. Other language that they use to create culture, make the charitable assumption, assume the best before reacting, and focus on the why, not just the what, creating meaning in daily tasks. And again, as we go through all these books, what language is doing here is creating boundaries. The things we're focused on, the things we're not going to allow, and what are we always remembering? You know?
Yeah, one of his subheadings is short for culture. which just the way he talks about it kind of reminds me of the way that we talk about improv in the improv community, where it's like you can have the positive aspects of a cult without the negative parts.
Yeah, cult is culture. It's threads of behavior, and culture is boundaries. What are we focused on and what are we not focused on? So yeah, it doesn't have to be negative. Culture, you can have a very positive culture, right? They're creating a culture of service and caring and excellence and proactivity, and skill and kindness, right? Make the charitable assumption. That's a culture of kindness. The service business can be hard, right? Anyone that's been in the business for a moment will admit that. But you're either going to become bitter and jaded about it, or you're just going to try and assume the best in everybody and for your team members too. Okay, chapter 5, corporate smart versus restaurant smart. This is where Will his career starts to take off. Will has the opportunity to become, I don't remember what job, but a bigger job in Danny Meyer's group. And his father actually advises him against it and tells him to go explore bigger companies. Danny Meyer's group is, 5 restaurants. They're very famous, successful restaurants, but there's still only 5 restaurants. And his father encourages him to explore like a bigger company to learn how business is done, And Will realizes that while Meyer is very restaurant smart, corporate structures offer different advantages. I can confirm that. There are positives and negatives to a larger company, right? But a larger company like the one I'm in now, they have very established practices and teams that do robust accounting. They do P&L management, finance review. So smaller restaurants, maybe nimble. There's no red tape. More hospitality for sure. Large companies offer more essential tools, accounting, HR, but can sometimes sacrifice autonomy. Example, every kitchen manager ordering dish soap from different suppliers. Probably Danny's 5 restaurants all bought from different people. But I have a robust slate of corporate contracts that I get a discount on my rice from because we order for 100 communities. So there's pros and negatives, right? Embracing business acumen. He takes a role at Restaurant Associates as an assistant purchaser and controller. Talk about just like a functionary job, right? But he learns about costing, inventory, accounts payable and receivable, and P&L management. Huge business tools to have in your pocket. He develops a love for the financials, and he sees them as a part of the mise en place for business success. And I heart this. I heart this. Mm-hmm. Mise en place is French. It literally means stuff in place. And it is the term that a cook uses for his station setup. Where do I put the basil? Where do I put the salt? Where do I put the lemon? Where do I put the butter? Where do I put the oil? And the physical way that you arrange all of this will determine often how your service goes. And having a very organized mise is a requisite for successful operation. And I've expanded that, and Will obviously has too. Most of us have. In any job, there's a set of instruments, tools, and even concepts and processes that are necessary or potentiate your success. So he figures that very early on. Financial literacy is often missing in restaurants. Oh my God, it's missing. I didn't know anything but is essential for sustainability. A lot of chefs or artists, we have no idea that you also have to light bill. And the margins in restaurants are very narrow. I remember one restaurant when I finally learned to do food costing. The difference between making money on this salad that we had and losing money was, I think, 3 olives. Wow. And I'm not kidding. Yeah, it was 3. So there was a reason that we'll count the number of olives or number of cashews that get put on a dish. And you always feel like I'm being shortchanged on cashews. But that's too, you can't make money if you're not careful with that stuff. Yeah, I choose walnuts over pine nuts, even though pine nuts taste better in the makeup of the dish, but because every time I make a salad, I lose $5. Not smart for business, So he realizes numbers tell the story. An example, a high-cost line item isn't just about the numbers. It reveals ordering errors and operational inefficiencies, just like the dish soap I was talking about. Five kitchen managers ordering from different companies were wasting money. And it's not just a joke. Like, that's why our cooks can't have health insurance. And that's why we can't get a raise. And all that stuff like that trickles down. It's not just to the like owner's profits, but it's to especially the team's experience. So understanding finances is the difference between business success and blind faith. I, again, heart those challenges with corporate structures. HR, so he has problems with the big structures of the company. He fires a very well-loved server who is always late because he can get away with it, and he doesn't care about his team, but his check average is so high, and the patrons love him so much that and Will's not playing that game, and he's like, where were you? He's like, oh, I was late. He's like, you can't do that. He's like, well, I don't care. And Will's like, okay, don't bother suiting out. You're fired. And then corporate HR reinstates this guy because and they don't even talk to Will about it. They just like, no, we're putting it back on. So terrible. So that is corporate authority with no ground level insight. Will is not long for that company after that. He's learned what he needs to. They're not really about like Danny Meyer's first tenet of hospitality. It was just take care of each other, not just the guests, but the employees too. Yeah. So around this time, Danny Meyer gets the contract for all the food and beverage at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So Will gets put in charge of everything except the fine dining restaurant, the Modern. I had a friend that worked there actually as a pastry chef. I think they had a Michelin star.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Did you eat there?
No, I never ate there. But the only Danny Meyer restaurant I've eaten at is Gramercy Tavern.
Gramercy Tavern.
Which is delicious.
Tom Colicchio.
Yeah.
So there's all these dovetails to people who are interested in this stuff. If you watch, the Food Network, Bravo, Tom Colicchio is a major player in these restaurants in Danny Meyer's. Yeah. So Will gets very promoted to a very big job very early on. Danny clearly sees his passion and his skill, right? He's developed a lot of these skills. The P&L management's very smart. And Will's excited to bring the challenge of bringing like this corporate smart side to the restaurant smart company. And like, I get excited about stuff like that too. I don't want to work for Starbucks, but I want to have Starbucks's repeatability, So he balances fine dining with operational efficiency, navigates challenges, including keeping displays stocked without overloading inventory. That's a question. Are we providing the perfect service, or are we also careful with money? So if you have a buffet, which they do, and you close at 9, when do I stop refilling the food? At 8:55? I'm losing thousands of dollars a month in food if I do that. But then if I am still open, shouldn't I have the best food? So they work to balance that, right? What we would do is like, we would stop at 8:15. And then if somebody came in, we might just cook them the food for them, cook for one person. You can find ways around. So he developed something he calls the rule of 95.5. I think this is genius.
I love this.
My nurse loves this, actually. So the rule of 95.5 is if you manage 95% of your budget responsibly, it allows for 5% of foolish spending that enhances the guest and team experience. Meticulous budgeting allows for indulgences like extravagant staff parties. I do this, right? I do this exact thing. I ensure the small comforts and luxuries for the team. Everyone has comfortable chairs. We all have 3 monitors. These little touches that actually don't hit the P&L too much. If you do the rest of it very well, you can absolutely treat the team to Starbucks.
Yeah.
And treating our team to Starbucks would cost $300, $500. So it's not insignificant. You have to be careful, but
yeah, I love this. I think it's a good thing to consider in many lines of businesses, not just hospitality, but he gives the example of like when he added a gelato cart in MoMA.
Oh, the blue spoons.
Yeah, and he got like a great deal on the gelato itself and all the cart and all these things.
Yeah, got a good deal from the gelato company.
Yeah, but then he splurged on these tiny blue spoons from Italy that were apparently just perfect.
They were perfect. They were special.
Yeah.
And it was an extravagance and too expensive and not justifiable when you just look at the numbers, but it was something special. And
yeah, it's a great way to think about managing budgets for your team and customers.
Yeah. You can't have too many blue spoons, like treat culture nowadays. I'm going to just treat myself. Well, there's my bank account. Okay.
Oh, yeah. What are your blue spoons?
What are your blue spoons? See, there's language creating culture. I love it. Okay. Chapter 6, pursuing a true partnership. So early on, back to the beginning, Will spent a summer working at Spago as half a busboy because he was not good. They only gave him 7 tables instead of 14. His dad got him the job, but he worked hard and enthusiastically. He gained acceptance from colleagues. I'll tell you, like a high-spirited team member will overlook your incompetence a little bit. We'll tease you about it, but we'll also help you. But he has some formative moments, including the chef de cuisine screaming at him when he broke a dish. Just screaming at him. And I don't even think it was his fault. I think he opened a cabinet.
Yeah, I think it was the way the dishes were stacked in the cabinet.
Yeah.
And so he opened it and they crashed.
So he saw a couple things. And first, of course, it shaped how he later critiques his own team. You obviously don't do that in public. But also the theme in this is that the dining room is going to be as important as the kitchen, especially in fine dining. The service, I don't want to say it was an afterthought, but there's a formal stiffness, like British service, right? They're just like standing by. And it's all about the food. And Will and the chef de cuisine screaming at him was part of that. It was like, you guys don't matter. Only my food matters. And that's not why we go to restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I, as someone who's gone to, when I was in a city that I was unfamiliar with, I lived in Vancouver for a year. I went to the same restaurant every single day for a year. Somewhat for the fried cheese sticks that they had because it made me comfortable, but a lot because I knew the waitstaff and they were nice and they were kind and they were, hospitable, and I felt at home there. It wasn't just for the food. So in the 80s, we see the rise of the celebrity chef. Hospitality kind of took a back seat to the cult of the chef, which we definitely have seen with Food Network culture. Around this time, after the MoMA thing, Danny asks Will to be the GM of 11 Madison Park. This is still in its brasserie phase. We've been rewatching, I've been watching for the first time, Sex and the City.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Big takes Carrie to the 11 Madison Park. At one point, it's the old one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You caught that.
I caught that, yeah. Danny's looking to upgrade the restaurant, right, to make it something special. And he asked Will to be the GM. Will's hesitant due to his obviously past fine dining experiences. And he has no real experience being the GM of something so high end. He makes Danny promise. He's like, I'll do this, but I want to be the GM of Shake Shack in a year.
Yeah.
Which is his dream. So
he ends up not doing.
He ends up not doing. So Danny agrees. EMP is a brasserie at the time, and EMP is famous. They're in a very special building. The building was supposed to be like 20 or 30 stories tall or something. Then they wound up being. So the lobby where 11 Madison Park is a giant room with, 30-foot ceilings or something. So it's this grand room, which is a bit of a disconnect with the brasserie aspect of it. So Will's like set out to figure out how to harmonize this space. They look for somebody special to be the chef, and they find Daniel Hume in San Francisco, who I think he started cooking at like 14 or something, and that tracks. Probably washing dishes and taking out the trash in some Swiss restaurant. But Daniel earned his first Michelin star when he was 24. Okay. So at 29, he gets the job. Advice from Will's dad during this time is run toward what you want, not away from something else. So even though Will's dream is to run Shake Shack, he agrees with Danny to do a 1-year deal. He'll run EMP if Danny lets him run Shake Shack. Danny agrees. And their first kind of effort is to create a chef-manager partnership rather than an opposition, which is true in a lot of restaurants. The front of house and back of house fight a lot. Fine dining typically favors the chef supremacy over service. Will wants to really create open communication and bridge the divide between the kitchen and the service. Daniel Hume agrees. He's also had bad experiences with this divide before. Hume is also pretty young at the time, so he's open to start a revolution. And they work to make decisions together. Chapter 7, setting expectations. I think this is genius. I just did this too with the team. They set a very concise, focused mission statement. Why are we here? And they come up with be the 4-star restaurant for the next generation. So everything they do, they filter through that.
And the stars, this kind of confused me reading it, but I think they're talking about
that's the New York Times.
That's the New York Times stars, right? Which is out of 4.
That's out of 4.
Yeah.
So a 4-star restaurant, you're talking about La Bernardin, you're talking about Danielle. And I've left Daniel Boulud out of, there's some amazing stories of Daniel Boulud who is the most famous chef, really, at top 3-star Michelin chef, who somehow Will like winds up at a frat party with, and I think they smoke pot, and then and they get drunk off a keg. And Daniel, could not be more famous at this point, winds up like cooking scrambled eggs for Will and his crew, like at 3 a.m. in his apartment or something like that. It's just fucking legendary. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit in the kitchen, so there's gonna be some, but it's crazy. During his time in Cornell, I think he goes to dinner at Danielle in New York, which is Danielle's flagship restaurant. And they do like a tasting menu. Will gets to sit at like the chef's table, which is like overlooking the kitchen in a secret area. And that's right after his mom died.
That's the dinner with his dad.
That's the dinner with his dad. And Daniel.
Yeah, he like takes such good care of them.
He takes such good care of them. He sits with them for hours after the kid. He's the last one to leave the restaurant. Because I remember now, Daniel came to do a presentation for Will's college. And he met Will at that time, and he literally wound up back in Will's dorm room or something, like cooking scrambled eggs. But then when Will's mom passed away, like he took his dad to eat at Danielle, and Danielle took and this is the most famous chef in the world, is cooking special for them, sending them amuse-bouche after amuse-bouche, and just making their life better and taking that pain away. And Will, like, he remember that forever. And Daniel comes in and out of the story from times. Anyway, as you said, the 4 stars are from the New York Times, and they're a New York restaurant, and that is their first real mission, is to like get the 4 stars. 3 Michelin stars is a loftier goal. During this time, that I think it's like 2007, New York City fine dining is in flux. You have many old school formal white tablecloth restaurants closing. Younger diners are rejecting stuffy formality. You have certain stalwarts like Per Se and Jean-Georges who are still beloved and still maintain their 3-star status, Michelin stars, but they're no longer at the center of the conversation. Jean-Georges is the granddaddy of granddaddies of fine dining, but he's not in the conversation as a revolutionary or as like somebody on the forefront of food. Will and Daniel, they want irreverence, informality, and human connection to be what they're about while keeping fine dining's high standards and excellence. Early team challenges. I see you're talking about Laura.
Yeah. No, I can't remember which situation this is about. But yeah, at some point he says, so Laura's one of his managers that he trusts. And he's like, every leader should have a Laura, somebody who feels comfortable telling you when you aren't acting as the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the beginning, there's a divide between the staff. There's the old guard. They're more casual with the old AMP, and the new managers that came with Daniel are trying to drive a new standard of excellence. They have a lot of standards in place, but no systems to deliver them. The real thing here is they experience a war almost between the more traditional fine dining people that follow the rules and regulations of fine dining, even though they don't know why they follow those rules, and then Will, who wants to break the mold and lead with hospitality first. So, Union Square's first principle, take care of each other. He finds some of the old staff are phoning it in, but the new team is also too rigid. He sets the standard. He talks to every team member. He breaks up cliques, which is, it's your ship, right? He doesn't let managers sit together at staff meal. And you say a lot of this aligns with the first 90 days.
Yeah. It's like the listen first.
Mm-hmm. So during this initial phase, he looks to find people's strengths. And in this example, his father, who was a platoon leader, I think in Vietnam, he had a team member named Kentucky who was bad at everything. Mm-hmm. Like, just so bad at everything. Like, almost could get them shot. I don't know. But he had one thing that he was good at. He had an incredible sense of direction. Didn't matter where you put him in the jungle. He knew which way north. So they kept this guy around just to be a human compass or something. Will finds a food runner who's struggling as a food runner, but for some reason, his attention to detail and his leadership qualities make him the best expediter on earth. And the expo is maybe the most important position in the restaurant. That is the person that is the go-between between the front of the house and the kitchen. So he's the one that calls the orders, tells the chef when to cook what, keeps the tickets straight, sends them out, calls the waiters. He's the center in football. And I don't know, but like this guy, your restaurant will live and die on the expo. And this guy who couldn't run food, he could expo. So Will loves the 1 minute manager approach. He critiques the behavior, not the person. That's the book, 1 minute manager. Praises with emotion, critiques without it. Praise in public, critique in private. Handling young managers, he teaches people to avoid letting frustrations build up by being very clear about their expectations. Here's a good example of a young manager who's also, of course, friends with the team, and for a long time fails to tell a waiter that his shirt is unironed. And he wants to tell him because he knows it's wrong and he knows it's his responsibility to share with him the standards, but he's also wants to be liked and he doesn't do it. So Will really coaches them. Set these expectations early and avoid silent resentment. You can do it in such a way like, hey, John, it's really good to see you. I'm glad you're here. That shirt's looking a little rough. Could you do me a favor, go upstairs, hit it with an iron before you get on the floor? All right, let me know if you need anything. And getting that stuff out at the moment that it's happening rather than letting it fester is good for the managers. And here he is practicing Danny Meyer's thing of taking care of the team. He's taking care of his managers.
Yeah, and he also talks about like everybody on the team should be hearing more about what they did well than what they could do better. And I liked this. If you can't find more compliments to deliver than criticism, that's a failure of leadership. Either you're not coaching them sufficiently or you've tried and it's not working and they should no longer be on the team or in a different role somewhere else. This is a little like Jocko-esque, I think, actually.
Leadership is leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership is leadership. There's a lot of Jocko stuff in here. He talks about every manager lives with the fantasy that their team can read their mind.
Yeah.
Right? I that's true of me. In reality, you have to make your expectations clear. Your team can't be excellent if you're not holding them accountable for the standards that you have set. You need to normalize these corrections by making them swiftly, wherever they are needed, and in private.
Yep.
Whether criticism or praise, it's the leader's role to give their team feedback all the time. Get used to it. It's not comfortable. Exactly what we said. Every person on their team should be hearing more about what they did well than what they need to do better. Here, Will figures out like 30 minutes a day can transform a culture. I agree with this. It's absolutely genius. So that it's not revolutionary. We're going to have a 30-minute stand-up meeting before service. At that time, you can talk about not just operational things, but you can start to drive the language and execution of culture. Will is at heart a systems guy. When initiating change, he looks for the best lever, whatever will allow him to transmit the most force with the least amount of energy. Hello, jiu-jitsu. And there is no better lever than a 30-minute meeting with your team. I really just did this in my current community. They were not doing a daily stand-up. They're good. We don't need it. I was like, no, I think you do. There's a lot of dropped balls. There's a lot of miscommunications. We're going to get together for 20 minutes a day and have a quick, what are you doing today? What do you need from me? This is what we're about. Okay, bye. That's enough, you know? So they, at EMP, they ran their meeting and set the tone. How they set the tone and how they ran the meeting was at least as important as how they ran service. The meeting started on time and they ended on time. He ran all the meetings for a year before letting someone else run them. He really set the tone. He removed ambiguity. He sets a very well-organized template, probably overkill, but he wanted his notes and his meeting organization to be as beautiful as Daniel Hume's plates. And this was a kind of hospitality for his team. I thought about this as I wrote the elaborate spend downs for my team. And I was like, I'm going to write them the best worksheet that they can possibly use. So he uses his pre-meal meeting to communicate the why. He speaks to the spirit of the restaurant and what they're trying to build. And he really takes time to celebrate the wins at this 30-minute meeting. He goes through inspiring stories. He shares his own experiences of great hospitality and encourages others to do so. One, he shares it's fun when he went to get his hair cut, and I think this became a thing in New York at the time. They'll give you a beer while you get your hair cut. They offered him a glass of whiskey. Do you want a shot of whiskey? And it was just an unnecessary, unreasonable touch of hospitality at his barber to be like, hey, you're a dude. We're all dudes. This is a dude world. Do you want a whiskey? We know you're escaping from reality for 30 minutes and I don't know if it's quite like the barbershop movies, but that's very touching to him. And he shares that at these meetings, and he's pushing this, these grace notes, right, as part of their culture. It's do one more thing that will blow people's minds. He finds employees who aren't succeeding, they tend to really fall into two camps, those that aren't trying and those that are. And I also think that's genius. So if they're trying, they have to be handled differently. If they're not trying, that's one thing. But if they are trying, you, just like Jocko talks about, like it's on you to coach them, counsel them, mentor them into success, or to find them a different role. Or if that doesn't work, then to manage them out. But it's your responsibility. Employees who aren't trying, okay, that's a different conversation. So that's chapter 7.
Yeah, and we are actually, this episode's running pretty long, so...
Sorry!
Well, it's really personal for you, and there's a lot of stories and things, so...
There's a lot of stories. I will say, if you can run a restaurant or work in a restaurant, you can do anything.
Yeah, I can believe it. Having not worked in a restaurant, I have a lot way more...
But you see how I work in our home,
now.
how I move packages, like how I keep our... There's... it's a little like being at war. It's not quite as violent, but it's a little bit, and you have to adapt and perform, and you have to strive, and every moment counts. We're trying to make my 50th birthday reservation at the French Laundry. Yeah. And I'm on the French Laundry's website, and in Thomas Keller's kitchen, apparently in every kitchen of his, there is a Vacheron Constantin clock, which is Vacheron Constantin is one of the original big 3 Swiss clocks. It's very expensive. They're not that good. They're okay. And under it is just the inscription, sense of urgency.
Oh, that's like on the Bear where they have like every minute.
Sense of urgency. Well,
every second counts or something like that.
Both Thomas Keller and...
That's where that came from.
and both Thomas Keller and Will Guidara consulted on the Bear.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the Bear, if you haven't seen it, is... I would say a 90% realistic exploration of what restaurant life is like, including the mental health challenges, the abuse, the internalized, unexplored trauma. The only thing in that show that doesn't resonate is locking that dude in the walk-in. It's not cool, man, and somebody should have told him that doesn't happen. Other than that, his kind of mental health journey and the way the chefs treated him and his obsessive, almost pathological need to win and drive is very, very accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also just a great show.
It's just such a good show.
Haven't watched
anyway,
it. I know we've talked about it before.
So what you learn in a restaurant is sense of urgency.
Yeah.
From the moment you walk in until you leave, you are going, and you better figure it out because it's a merciless world. Think about it, people come in, they're hungry. When I'm hungry, imagine 100 of us. Anyway, so yes, episode's running long. My wife's cutting us off. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, so we're gonna split this into 2 parts just so it doesn't become a 3-hour episode. And
still might be a 3-hour episode.
We'll see. At some point we need to go to bed. So,
Listen, you made me do this. Okay.
So
I wanted to nap.
Yeah. We're committed. We're committed to you guys. What can we say?
Urgency.
So we're going to wrap here, and then we will see you guys next week with part 2 of this LBC on Unreasonable Hospitality. So thank you guys.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay.
The Love and Leadership podcast is produced and co-hosted by me, Kristen Brunn-Sharkey, and co-hosted by Mike Sharkey. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. We can't stress enough just how much these reviews help. You can follow us on LinkedIn under Kristen Brunn-Sharkey and Michael Sharkey, and on Instagram as Love Leader Pod. You can also find more information on our website, loveandleadershippod.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.